Hello, this is Dr. Joe Muscolino. The following is an AI-generated simulated podcast of the contents of my ebook. I've created this and providing this because I believe that it is a very casual way and a comfortable way of listening to and absorbing the information. I hope you do enjoy it.
Ever woken up after a light jog, and it feels like someone stabbed you right in the inner thigh?
Oh, yeah.
Or even worse, you had to sit out your weekend soccer game because of this searing pain in your groin.
Yeah.
You, my friend, have experienced the dreaded adductor strain.
Yep.
And today, we're really diving deep into this.
Yeah.
We're taking on a comprehensive manual therapy treatment guide for adductor strain. That's our document for today.
Okay.
And thankfully, we have an expert to guide us. So no need to be a doctor or any kind of medical expert, really. By the end of this deep dive, you'll understand this super common sports injury inside and out, I promise. Now, I have to admit, I was really surprised to learn that the most commonly strained muscle in this group is the adductor longus. What makes this muscle so prone to problems?
It is interesting, right? I mean, all 5 adductor muscles work together, right? They're a team. But the adductor longus, like the name suggests, it's the longest, so it's often the most engaged. And because of that, it's just more vulnerable to those sudden stretches or contractions that we subject it to.
5 muscles. See, this is what I love about these deep dives. We go way beyond I pulled a groin muscle, and we really get into the mechanics of what's going on in there. Can you walk us through these 5 muscles? What do they actually do?
Absolutely. Okay, so picture this. You're standing with your feet together. Now raise one leg out to the side, away from your body. That's abduction. Now bring that leg back in, across your body. That's adduction, and that's the main job of your adductor group.
Okay, so it's all about that inward motion. Got it. But we've got 5 different muscles involved. Are they all created equal, or do they each have their own specialties?
Great question. They definitely work together, but you're right. They each have slightly different roles to play. The adductor longus, as we said, it's the longest and the most superficial, meaning it's closest to the surface. Then you've got the brevis, which is shorter and sits a bit deeper. The magnus is the powerhouse of the group. It's the largest, and it actually helps with rotation, too.
Yeah.
And last but not least, we have the gracilis, a long strap-like muscle, and the pectineus, which also helps with hip flexion.
It's like a whole team of muscles working in perfect coordination. That's amazing. So when we talk about an adductor strain, we're talking about damage to any one of these muscles or even multiple muscles at once, right?
Exactly. And here's the thing. The location of your pain can actually give you some clues about which muscle or muscles are actually affected. So, for instance, pain higher up in the groin, that might point to the pectineus, whereas pain that's more towards the inner thigh, that could signal a problem with the longus or magnus.
Wow, that's incredible. So the exact location of your pain can really act like a roadmap, pointing you to the specific adductor muscle that needs attention. This is already eye-opening. Now, we know these muscles are all about that adduction, that inward leg motion, but what actually makes them strain in the first place? I mean, we've all felt that sudden pull, right? That sharp pain in the groin. But what's really happening in those muscle fibers?
So there are 2 main ways these muscles can get injured: overstretching and forceful contractions.
Okay, I think I get overstretching. You push your leg out too far in a split, maybe you're doing some intense yoga, and bam, you feel that painful stretch in your inner thigh. But forceful contraction? That's always seemed counterintuitive to me. It seems like the muscle should be more likely to tear when it's being stretched too far, not when it's contracting,
Yeah, no, you're right. It does seem kind of counterintuitive. But imagine our soccer player again. Okay, so they're going for a really powerful kick, driving their leg inward.
Right?
And all of a sudden, another player comes in and blocks their movement. And that sudden, forceful contraction, but against this resistance.
Oh, wow.
That's a prime example of how you can get a strain from a forceful contraction.
Yeah.
Right? It's like you're trying to slam a door shut, but there's something jammed in the way.
Okay, that makes sense. It's that unexpected stop that kind of throws everything off. So let's say you're, feeling a twinge in your groin after a tough workout or that weekend game. How do you know if it's just regular muscle soreness or if you might be dealing with an actual adductor strain?
Well, with an acute strain, I mean, your body will definitely give you some pretty clear signals,
Yeah.
You'll feel a sharp kind of immediate pain. Often, it's right at the point where the muscle actually attaches to the bone.
Ooh.
There could be swelling. And in some cases, you might even see some bruising in that inner thigh area.
So if I can barely walk after that soccer game, it's probably more than just muscle soreness, huh?
Yeah, probably a little bit more serious than that. And remember how we were talking about those 5 different adductor muscles?
Yeah.
Well, the exact location of your pain can be super helpful here. It's like a built-in pain GPS.
Okay, I like that. A pain GPS. So walk me through this. How can I use this pain GPS to figure out which muscle might be acting up?
Okay, so for example, if you're feeling that really sharp pain right near your groin, close to where your inner thigh meets your pubic bone, that could indicate a strain in the pectineus muscle.
Okay.
But on the other hand, if the pain is lower down, more towards the middle of your inner thigh, that might point to the adductor longus, maybe even the gracilis.
This is amazing. So just by paying attention to those subtle differences in pain location, we can get a much better idea of what's really going on.
Exactly.
But, life happens and sometimes you ignore those early warning signs. Maybe you try to push through the pain. What happens then? What are the long-term consequences of not addressing an adductor strain, like properly?
Well, that's when it can become chronic, which you
Yeah.
really want to avoid. That initial sharp pain, it might subside, but you could be left with this nagging, lingering pain that just won't quit. It can really limit your range of motion,
Yeah.
making even simple things difficult, like taking long strides when you're running or even just getting out of bed in the morning.
Okay, that sounds awful. Definitely don't want to be hobbling around because of some old groin injury. So let's talk treatment. What are the best ways to deal with an adductor strain, especially like right when it happens in those initial stages?
Well, the first line of defense, especially in those first few days after an acute injury, has got to be the good old rice-eat protocol.
Ah, yes. Rice, rest, ice, compression, elevation. It's like the first aid kit for any sports injury. But for those who might not know, can you remind us why this protocol is so effective?
Sure, rest is crucial because it lets those injured tissues start to heal without any further stress. Ice helps to bring down the inflammation, and it numbs the area, which provides some much-needed pain release. Compression, that helps control the swelling by limiting fluid buildup, and then elevation just further assists that drainage process.
So it's all about like calming things down and giving your body the best chance to heal.
Exactly.
But what about all the debate around icing injuries? There seems to be some back and forth about whether it actually helps long term or if it might even slow down healing.
Yeah, you're right. There has been some conflicting research on that, and the research is definitely still evolving. But what we can say for sure is that ice is really effective for pain relief,
Right.
and especially in those early acute stages. Managing that pain is key to allowing your body to kind of start the healing process.
Makes sense. So pain relief first, and then we can figure out the rest. Now, once that initial pain and swelling have subsided, what are some key strategies for preventing those chronic issues that we talked about? Avoiding that long-term pain and stiffness.
That's where targeted stretching and manual therapy really come into play. Gentle stretching, that's going to help restore flexibility and range of motion.
Yeah.
And then techniques like massage can be really effective at addressing any muscle tightness or scar tissue formation that might be developing. And this is actually where the document that we're focusing on really shines. Dr. Muscolino goes into great detail about various manual therapy techniques that can be super effective for these types of injuries.
So it's like a treasure trove of hands-on healing, but specifically for adductor strains.
Precisely.
Yeah.
He covers everything from very specific muscle release techniques to joint mobilization,
Oh,
all aimed at restoring optimal function to that adductor group.
that's incredible. Now, speaking of real-world applications, I wanted to talk about the case study of Dev that we found in the document. It really highlights how these injuries happen in the real world, even when we're not, professional athletes. So they describe Dev as a 25-year-old software engineer, which, let's be honest, is a pretty relatable profession for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure.
Dev sits at a computer all day, but tries to stay active by playing soccer on the weekends. I mean, sounds pretty familiar, right?
Definitely. I think a lot of us can relate to that work-life balance struggle.
Exactly. And in the document, they mentioned that Dev had been feeling, increasingly stiff lately, which, again, not surprising given his, desk job.
Right.
And then during one of his soccer games, he goes for a powerful kick, gets blocked mid-kick, and bam, he feels that sharp groin pain, like classic adductor strain. What really struck me about Dev's story was they mentioned how his desk job, where he's sitting for hours on end, it probably contributed to, like how bad his adductor strain actually was. What do you think about that connection?
Oh, absolutely. Dev's case is like a textbook example of how Our daily habits and routines, even the ones that seem totally unrelated, they can really impact like our susceptibility to these kinds of injuries.
Right.
When we sit for long periods, like a lot of us do, especially in office settings, those hip flexors, the muscles at the front of our hips, they tend to shorten up.
Right. Yeah, you get that.
And that shortening, it creates this chain reaction,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it can cause tightness in the adductors, those inner thigh muscles we've been talking about.
So it's like our bodies get like stuck in this shortened, tight position.
Exactly.
And then those muscles just aren't ready for those like faster, more powerful movements.
Yeah, exactly. Those tight adductors, they're already at a disadvantage, right?
Yeah.
And then when Dev goes for that powerful kick and there's that sudden resistance, it's like stretching a rubber band too far. Something's got to give. And in this case, it was his adductor muscle.
Yeah. Ouch. I mean, that analogy really makes it clear. It's not just about what we do in the gym or on the field.
Right.
It's about how we're treating our bodies all day, every day. Those like seemingly insignificant habits that can really add up.
Absolutely. And that's why, addressing muscle imbalances and incorporating regular stretching, that's so important for everyone. It's not just for athletes.
So true. We've covered so much in this deep dive, everything from the anatomy of the adductor group to like what actually happens when you strain one of those muscles, and even how to treat and prevent these injuries. So if our listeners were to take away just 3 key things from all of this, what would they be?
Okay, so number 1, adductor strains are super common, but the good news is they're preventable and treatable. You just got to know how.
Okay, that's good news. What else?
Number 2, understanding those mechanics. Knowing about the adductor group, all 5 of those muscles, how they work, their limitations, that's really key, both for prevention and for addressing these injuries effectively.
Okay, so know your muscles. What's number 3?
Number 3, never underestimate the power of a proper warm-up. And this is something that really resonated with me from Dr. Muscolino's work, the emphasis on those active warm-ups.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about that? What is an active warm-up and why is it so important, especially when it comes to adductor strains?
So an active warm-up is all about incorporating these dynamic movements that really mimic the activity that you're about to do. So instead of just doing those static stretches, holding a stretch, think high knees, leg swings, butt kicks, anything that gets those muscles moving, gets those joints lubricated before you really start pushing them.
Right.
It's like sending a memo to your body.
Yeah.
Like, hey, get ready, we're about to move.
I love that. You're giving your muscles a little heads up, not just like going from 0 to 60.
Exactly. And for the adductors, which are often tight, that active warm-up can be a game changer.
This has been a fascinating deep dive. I feel like I learned so much about something I thought I understood. But like any good deep dive, it's left me with a few lingering questions.
Always.
The document really focused on manual therapy, which sounds super effective. But what about other modalities? Could acupuncture be helpful for these types of injuries? Or dry needling? What about physical therapy?
Right.
Are there specific strengthening exercises that people should be doing? I guess we'll leave those questions out there for our listeners. Something for you to ponder. Maybe it'll spark your own deep dive into the world of adductor strain treatment and prevention. As always, if you uncover any fascinating insights, share them. Until next time, happy training and, warm up those adductors.
This is Dr. Joe Muscolino again. You've just listened to the AI-generated simulated podcast of the contents located within the ebook. I hope you enjoyed listening to this podcast and you found it informational. Thank you.